I thought it was a real monster there for a second. Misty appeared towering over him a few seconds later and practically roared at him. Oh yeah. Who's seeing things now, Mr. Genius, huh? He held his hands out to her and smiled placatingly while he laughed nervously and sweat dropped. Brock, on the other hand, decided to give voice to the more logical concern at present. Why is a Magnemite following us though? Yeah, that's a good question, Giselle agreed as the metallic Pokémon floated closer until it could be seen more clearly. Do you think it lives here? Misty questioned. However, before they could contemplate the matter any farther, Magnemite hovered over to Pikachu and tried to get as close to the electric type as it could. Pikachu merely flicked his ear at the wild Pokémon's closeness for a moment before moving a few steps away. The other electric, steel-type Pokémon followed him though and tried to get close again. Giselle opened her mouth and allowed anything else she was about to say just hang suspended as Pikachu moved away once more, only for Magnemite to follow. This became a strange trend that persisted without fail. Pikachu attempted to get away from Magnemite but the other Pokémon simply followed him wherever he went. Why do you think Magnemite is following Pikachu around like that? Ash pondered amongst his friends as he intently watched the odd scene and tried to figure out what exactly was going on. Brock shook his head. I don't know, but he furrowed his brow slightly. Magnemite is almost acting like it's infatuated with Pikachu or something. Finally, the electric Pokémon got tired of being tailed around like a Houndour on the trail of a Sentret and turned around, bristling out his fur, growling and baring his fangs while his cheeks sparked with electricity. Pikachu! He snapped warningly as the cheek sparks got bigger. Although, instead of scaring Magnemite, Pikachu's actions seemed to only spur it on. Evidenced by the way the metallic Pokémon drifted ever closer into Pikachu's electrical range. Seeing this, Brock smiled and laughed. Yeah, I think that's it. Magnemite is infatuated with Pikachu. You really think so? Misty asked. I think he's right, Giselle nodded. Look at Magnemite's face. Sure enough, as they all looked closer, it became evident that Magnemite's face right under its eye was blushing a faint pinkish hue. But how? Misty gaped. Magnemite isn't alive in the same biological way Pikachu is, that makes no sense. Brock shrugged. I mean it could. Think about it, Pokémon like Magnemite are very attracted to electrical currents and Pikachu is an extremely powerful electric type with energy to spare. Maybe Magnemite is attracted to that. Can metallic Pokémon even feel love? Giselle asked, which made Ash himself shrug. Well, no one knows everything about Pokémon, so it's a possibility, I guess. They are alive after all, otherwise they wouldn't be able to move around. Before they could contemplate on the matter any further, however, the air vent above their heads started to shake and tremble before it caved outward, busting to the ground as several dark blob shapes dropped to the floor. Ash and his friends stepped back as they tried to see what was falling from the ceiling and splatting on the ground, and when Brock directed the light toward it, their eyes collectively widened upon seeing a whole group of Grimer falling from the ventilation shaft. Uncurling from their blob shape, the large pack of living sludge rose up and threw their arms in the air as they cried out ominously, in total unison, at the group of trainers. Yelling in fearful tandem with his friends, Ash reached down to grab V and Pikachu while turning around on his heel. Too many to take on without the rest of the Pokémon, run. They all took off down the hall, running as fast as they could without even looking back to see if the Grimer were following them. Are they still following us? Misty yelled as she ran hard with her fists pumping up and down in front of her face. I don't know. Ash called back. Don't look back. Just keep running. Soon enough, they turned down another hall, but just as Ash and Brock took a few steps forward, they suddenly slammed straight into two other men and knocked all four of them to the ground. Ah! Ash and Brock both grunted in surprise as they hit the floor at the same time. What the heck? The former groaned as he rubbed his head. The two of them, as well as Misty and Giselle, who immediately started to help them up, were drawn to the strange men they had just bowled over and saw they were wearing one-piece blue and black uniforms that seemed to give away their identities as power plant workers. Hey, what are you kids doing in here? The first man, one with dark hair that hung in a messy poof over his forehead, demanded. The second man, this one with short brown hair, stood up as well and looked sternly at the four young trainers, shining his flashlight at them. Yes, what are you doing here? This is private property, you shouldn't be here. As Giselle finished helping him up, Ash replied urgently. Sir, look, we don't have time to explain. There are a whole group of Grimer following behind. He was cut off by the sound of suctioning, gross slime hurrying its way down the opposite hall. As well as the repeated chorusing of Grimer trumpeting their impending arrival. That. Misty pointed. We're running from that. The two power plant workers recognized the sound and became urgent as they gestured for the group of trainers to follow them. Come on. The dark-haired one yelled. Follow us to the control room, we'll lock ourselves in. They wasted no time and followed the two men quickly. Soon enough, the six of them were running down the hallway as fast as their legs could carry them until they finally reached a door with a keycard lock. The brown-haired worker took such a card out of his pocket and unlocked the door before urging everyone in as soon as it opened. Quick, everyone. Inside. Once they were all in, he shut the door and it automatically locked again while everyone breathed a collective sigh of relief. Now explain what you kids are doing here. The dark-haired man demanded after they'd recovered their breath. Ash quickly stepped forward and explained why they were at the power station, which caused both employees' eyes to widen as he finished. So the mayor sent you? One of them asked to Ash's head nod. Wow, well, I guess the situation throughout the town is more severe than we thought. The brown-haired man said to his coworker. Yeah, definitely, he agreed. Especially if he sent Pokémon trainers to help take out the Grimer. Why are there only two of you here? Giselle asked. And how did this happen? The power outage. The worker who had just finished speaking looked at Giselle to answer her. We're the graveyard shift, so it's just the two of us here tonight running the control room. Everything is automated here, so at the minimum, the plant only needs 2 people in here at night until full staff come on in the morning. The other one took over for him. And we're not exactly sure, but from past experience, we're almost positive it's because the Grimer blocked up the water going to the engine turbines again. Do you know how many Grimer are inside the building? Brock asked, to which he shook his head at. There shouldn't be any in here because we locked the place down as soon as the power went out. His comrade nodded. We were just on our way to lock the front door up when you kids got in here. But we don't know the Grimer got in, it's never happened like this before. We know how, Ash answered. They got in through the vents. The vents. They both responded in tandem. Well, I'm not surprised. The black-haired one shook his head. I suppose it was only a matter of time before they found the ventilation shafts. We need to find a way to get them out of here and unblock that waterway, Ash spoke up, stating the obvious. Is there any way we can get them all corralled into one place and chase them out? The two workers shared a look between them before the dark-haired one looked back to Ash. There might be one way. The other one hurried up to one of the massive computer monitors in the control room and input a few keys on the keyboard before a giant map of the interior of the power plant appeared on the screen. Here, he pointed up to a section of the floor plan where a room was located that had a long pipe going from it and merging with a map of the outside complex of the station, which was displayed next to the interior map. This room has a tunnel that helps direct the water drawn in from outside into the turbines here in the plant itself. The other worker looked at the kids. If you can chase the Grimer into that room and down that tunnel, you can force them back out into the bay outside and unclog the waterway at the same time. He then walked over to one of the drawers that was built into the control terminal and opened it up before pulling 3 sets of 2 walkie-talkies and flashlights. Here. The power station worker carried them back over to the 4 young trainers. Take these. Ash and his friends took the communication devices and flashlights, except Brock, who had his, while he kept 1 set for himself. If you 4 would be willing to go and help chase them to the aqueduct room, then you can use these to help communicate your positions and know when the Grimer are approaching you. The other worker pointed to the map of the power plant up on the monitor. The hallways in here are all interconnected. So that means you'll be able to chase the Grimer through these different connected points until you reach the room. The other man held up the 2 walkie-talkies he kept. I'll go stand near the door, and as soon as you get them corralled into the room, I'll unlock it with my key card. Ash and his friends all nodded in understanding and then looked at each other. So who's gonna go with who? Brock asked, though the worker standing at the terminal spoke before anyone else could. Actually, in order to do this right, each of you will have to take up separate positions at the different points in the hallways that lead to the aqueduct room. He gestured to one of the two walkie-talkies his coworker held. If you four head out into the halls, each junction is labeled with a number and letter so you'll be able to find your way if you follow them. He then gestured at the monitor again. To get the Grimer corralled to the room we've mentioned, the best way would be to lead them down halls A2, B-6, C1 and D8. Ash looked at his friends. Then I'll go find where the Grimer are at and chase them to A2 first, that'll be my position. If that's the case, the same worker spoke again. Then wherever you find them, lead them to hallway A2 and from there, it'll be a relatively straight line connecting the other 3 points together. I chose that particular route because at those junctions, there are only 3 ways to go and if 2 of you block off the ways they aren't supposed to go, they'll only have 1 way left. The way we need. But what if the Grimer don't run and instead turn to attack us? Giselle asked. I don't know Giselle, Ash spoke up. Remember, those other Grimer got pretty scared and ran off when we had our Pokémon attack them while they were after the mayor. Just don't let up when they come your way and besides, as we get them farther along it'll also mean that more of us will be turning up to help each other as our own jobs are completed. She nodded as the dark-haired man walked up with his walkie-talkie in hand. Okay, I'll head out to the aqueduct room and everyone but Ash can head out to the hallway junctions we need someone at. It doesn't matter who goes where, just make sure you're there and if you're in question about where you are, just radio and ask one of us. After everyone was ready, Ash looked down at Pikachu and V and smiled. Let's go you two. V, go ahead and turn into Flareon please. The evolutionary Pokémon nodded and then transformed into his fire-type form, much to the amazement of the 2 power plant workers. Then, as soon as he was finished evolving, Ash and the others headed out the door and into the hallway, immediately looking in both directions to make sure there were no Grimer anywhere. Not seeing them, Ash looked at his friends. They must have moved on. I'll head out and find them and then get to the A2 junction. From there I'll chase them to the next point so whoever is waiting for me, good luck. Brock, Misty and Giselle both wished him well and then headed out down the opposite direction with the worker who would be waiting at the aqueduct room. Ash, meanwhile, hurried in the opposite direction with Pikachu and V in tow. As well as Magnemite, who still tailed them at a distance. Of course, seeing this, he merely shook his head and chuckled. Well, more the merrier I guess. At least it's not against us. The young Pokémon trainer searched the halls for the Grimer and luckily managed to pass the A2 hallway on the way, which he committed to memory before speeding on. After a time of searching, he finally found the pack of sludgy menaces congregating together near a doorway, only a short distance away from him, as soon as he rounded a corner. Okay. He looked down at his 2 Pokémon. You both ready? Pikachu and V both nodded in response and then followed Ash as he jumped out into the open and shouted, Hey! Over here! You! Come on! The group of Grimer all seemed to hear him in tandem and then turned around to lay eyes on Ash. As soon as they did, the toxic waste Pokémon all threw their arms up and gave a guttural roar before immediately giving chase. That's our cue. Ash announced as he turned around and called over his shoulder. Come on guys, let's run. Pikachu and V were quick to follow after their trainer as the Grimer began chasing after them, almost like they had full garbage bags attached to their backs. Boy, I hope I remember how to get back to that junction. Ash said aloud as he and his Pokémon rounded another corner. The sounds of the Grimer behind them filling their ears with every step they took. One particularly sour Grimer decided to shoot a goopy mess of sludge at Pikachu's back but Magnemite took the surprise initiative of turning around and sending a strong thundershock at the incoming sludge ball. Ash heard the commotion and had turned around only to see the ball of sludge coming for Pikachu. He had no time to warn his partner though before he saw Magnemite come to Pikachu's rescue. As the 2 attacks cancelled each other out, Ash smiled and pumped his fist. Way to go Magnemite. Thanks. Just then, Ash managed to reach the A2 hallway junction and said a silent thank you to Arceus above before taking off down that particular indoor route. He could hear the Grimer still in hot pursuit, but since he knew he was now on the right path, all he had to focus on was getting to the next junction, where one of his friends would hopefully be waiting with their own Pokémon to take the pressure off of him. Ash had never been more glad for the flashlight he had in his hand than he was right now, because he knew that if he had been forced to run in the dark, he would have been utterly and completely screwed. Finally, as they kept running, Ash saw another flash of light, and in seconds, his own flashlight illuminated Giselle's form standing near the B6 junction. She was standing with her Marowak out as they blocked off the other hallway they weren't supposed to allow the Grimer to go down, leaving only two ways for them to go, and Ash was about to bar off the way they were coming now. As soon as he reached the brunette with Pikachu, V and Mangemite right behind him, Ash turned around and looked back at the approaching wave of Grimer. "They're coming, Giselle. Get ready." "Okay, Ash," she yelled back before looking down at Marowak. "Get ready, Marowak." Whack! He responded back while slamming his bone club into his hand. At that moment, Ash finally reached them and then turned the corner, pressing himself up against the wall flat while Giselle stood her ground firm. Then, just as the Grimer turned the corner and saw them standing there, Giselle moved quickly and called out, "Marowak, use Rage and Bonemerang." Her Pokémon growled aloud as he started to glow red and then, in a fierce rage, began thrashing around before chucking his bone at the throng of poison types in front of them. This sudden, surprise attack took the Grimer off balance, and due to their more cowardly nature, it caused them to stop dead as Marowak's bone club smacked one or two of them before twirling back into his hand. Seeing the other Pokémon raging in front of them as Marowak smashed and bashed his club into the floor, the group of Grimer were stunned still in surprise and also in slight fear, none of them making a move to attack Giselle's Pokémon. Ash took that moment of lax concentration to gesture to his own Pokémon and then, staying to the wall, slid out into the other hallway and slipped around behind the group of Grimer so they couldn't see him. Then, once he was in position, the young man called out, "Pikachu, use Thunderbolt. V, use Flamethrower." Both Pokémon released their attacks and aimed them directly at the floor behind the Grimer. This sudden explosion of electricity and fire behind them caused all of them to turn in fright. Seeing Pikachu and V standing in front of Ash, blocking the way they had just come, the Grimer turned and went to flee down the way Giselle was standing, only to see Marowak in their way, still raging madly as he slammed his bone club into the ground. This caused them to turn and flee down the only other way they could, which was the hallway Ash and Giselle had been attempting to chase them down in the first place. Seeing that they had succeeded, both of them cheered and then followed after the Grimer as they fled down the opposite hall towards the next junction point. "Hey!" Ash yelled into his radio as he pulled it out of his pocket and pressed the button on the side. "Whoever's at the next junction, get ready. They're coming your way." There was a few moments of static before Misty's voice responded back. "We're ready here." Keeping the fleeing group of Grimer in sight, Ash and Giselle followed hot after them with their own Pokémon staying close behind. Finally, when they rounded a slightly curved turn, they saw the Grimer approach the next hallway junction where Misty was already standing at the ready with her Staryu and Starmie. "Both of you get ready," she commanded while standing in between her star-shaped Pokémon. "Steady, steady." Misty waited until the whites of the Grimer's eyes were visible and then shouted, "Use Swift." Staryu and Starmie both unleashed a hail of jagged, spinning energy stars at the incoming horde of Grimer, and the attack itself took the already panicked poison types by surprise. As soon as the spinning discs of doom began washing over them, the Grimer all cried out together in fright and actually tried to backpedal, before getting stopped by Ash and Giselle. Having stayed right on their tail, the two trainers bringing up the rear had Pikachu, V and Marowak use a combination of attacks to keep them from getting around their makeshift barrier. The tactic worked, and with the way back, as well as Misty's own direction, both blocked off, the power plant invaders were forced to retreat down the C1 junction, which was exactly where they were supposed to go. This time, Ash and Misty, including Giselle, chased after the Grimer together while he called into the radio once again. "Brock, they're coming your way." He received a quick, "Got it," in reply, and then focused on giving chase to the Grimer until, in the matter of only a minute or two, they were coming within sight of Brock up ahead. whom was already having his graveler begin to direct the approaching Grimer down the last D8 junction by forming and then tossing large rocks at them. The combined effort of this and the other three ordering their Pokémon to attack from behind drove the large group of Grimer down the hall and toward the cleverly set trap. There was no time to celebrate though, because as soon as they caught up with Brock, all four of them were charging down the dark hallway with flashlights bobbing. "The Grimer are heading your way," Ash informed the worker waiting at the door of the aqueduct room. "Be ready with the door." Almost as soon as he finished speaking, the walkie-talkie came alive again and the power station employee was responding. "That's great. I'm ready here." Just a few short moments after saying that, he saw the large troop of Grimer stampeding his way, and as soon as he saw it, he slid his key card into the door and then opened it wide. On the heels of him doing this, Ash and the others appeared behind the Grimer with their Pokémon chasing after them and using whatever attacks were necessary to keep the scared Grimer going the right way. The power plant worker stood with his arms bravely extended so they couldn't go past him, but, fortunately, they chose the open door instead and began flooding into the aqueduct room. "Shut the door behind us," Ash instructed as he and his friends drew upon the door and ran through it. "We're gonna make sure they get chased out of this place for good." The man nodded and called after them a word of good luck and safety before quickly shutting and locking the door as soon as they were all inside. Once Ash and the others were in the room, all four of them shone their flashlights around to illuminate their surroundings and saw a large aqua channel stretching through the center of the large room. A big pipe on one side of the wall fed the water being channeled through it across the room and into several large, clear plastic pipes that took in the water and ferried it up through the ceiling above. Or at least, it would have been if the power was still on. Though as it was currently, the water was remaining stagnant in the channel. "Look!" Misty suddenly exclaimed as she directed her light towards the waterway. "The Grimer are disappearing down that pipe." They all looked ahead and, sure enough, the last of the Grimer were flooding down the main channel pipe, which was easily big enough to accommodate all of them. "Come on," Ash instructed. "Let's go after them and make sure they make it back out to the bay." "Right." His friends agreed as they followed him over the railing and down into the ankle-deep water. The water level having marginally dropped since the power cut off and no more was being drawn in. The four of them then disappeared down the long, dark recesses of the water pipe and kept their lights shining on the backs of the fleeing Grimer as they went. "Use flamethrower to keep them going," Ash commanded. "Flurry." The currently fire-affiliated Pokémon called out as he sent a hot torrent of flames rushing at the retreating forms of the Grimer. The attack only served to bolster their flight as the group of wild Pokémon started to move even quicker to escape their pursuers. Eventually, they started to see the gloomy light of the outside fill the otherwise dark pipe as the slats of the waterway's great covering came into view. A covering that was filled with still more Grimer, revealing the cause of what had made the water flow stop and thereby, the power plant to shut down. "There it is." Giselle pointed and yelled, her voice echoing throughout the pipe. "Let's get them outside." Ash called back in reply just as the Grimer reached the end of the pipe where their brethren were waiting. However, before they could slip through the bars of the grate in order to join the horde of other Grimer that Ash and his friends could see waiting outside in the bay, there was a sudden disturbance that caused all the many waiting at the exit to flee. Whatever it was also caused the Grimer they had been chasing to quickly slip through the grate and flee from the pipe as fast as they could go. This of course only caused the four trainers that had been chasing them to stop and adopt expressions of confusion. "What just happened?" Misty asked rhetorically. Something seemed to have scared them off, but what was it? Giselle screwed her eyes up in a perplexed fashion, but none of them were given the time to ponder on the oddity of the situation before their questions were answered. The water out in front of the pipe in the bay started to bubble and roil, and then, from the depths like an emerging sea monster, a huge, humped-up, purple mass of sludge emerged. As they watched from inside the pipe, what could only have been described as an unnaturally large monstrosity rose up from out of the bay and expanded itself in width until its sheer size totally covered the entire expanse of the circumference of the pipe. What is that?" Giselle stammered in a voice of fear and disbelief. At that moment, the glowing eyes of the creature recoiled inward on itself before opening its mouth. Having a bad feeling at what was coming, Ash yelled, "Everybody down!" And then dropped to his belly on the bottom of the water-filled pipe, pulling Pikachu and V both close to him as he did so. Even snatching Magnemite out of the air and into his chest as well so the metallic Pokémon wouldn't get hurt. Misty, Brock and Giselle managed to do so with their own Pokémon. Even though Graveler and Marowak were loath to have even been walking through water, let alone getting submersed belly first in it. At that same moment, the creature outside of the pipe expelled a massive ball of what looked to be condensed sludge at the grating covering the pipe, which easily smashed straight through the steel bars and sent them flying back into the pipe. A few pieces of the jagged shards very narrowly missing the trainers and their Pokémon that were now ducking for cover. Looking up with wide eyes after the attack was over, Ash knew they were sitting ducks inside of the pipe, so he quickly commanded his Pokémon. Pikachu, be quick. Use Thunderbolt and Flamethrower to scare that thing away from the pipe. Then, as an afterthought, he added, but try not to let your lightning hit the water, Pikachu. Wriggling out from his hold, Pikachu and V both ran a few paces forward and then unleashed their attacks, attempting to contain them as much as possible so their trainers wouldn't be hurt in such close quarters. The combined electricity and fire attacks managed to succeed in making the giant creature draw away from the pipe and out into the bay a little more. This gave Ash and the others the chance they needed as they all shot up and ran for the now clear exit and stopped right at the edge. Since the mouth of the pipe was big and wide enough to hold all of them at the same time, it allowed each of them to get a look out into the bay where they saw the identity of the monster that had attacked them. That thing is. Brock began in a shaky voice. Massive. Misty finished as sweat dropped from the side of her temple. In front of them, only a short distance away from the pipe, was the hulking form of the by far biggest Grimer any of them had ever seen. Its sheer mass and height alone was easily triple that, or more, of a normal Grimer, and the sludge making up its body seemed to be a richer, darker shade of purple than its nearby smaller kin. Flying Flagon, that thing is huge. Misty exclaimed in a complete stupor. I didn't know Grimer got that big. Let's admire it later and get out of this pipe. Brock yelled as an urgent advisory. We're sitting far-fetched here. Up. Ash pointed to a walkway with railing on the side that was just above the pipe they were standing in. Come on guys, climb up with me. With Pikachu and Flareon both climbing up onto their trainer's shoulders and Magnemite still tailing them as usual, Ash jumped up and grabbed hold of the edge of the walkway before pulling himself up. Then, using his legs once he was up high enough, he scrambled onto the walkway and then made room as Brock did the same once he returned Graveler. The two of them helped up Giselle and Misty after they returned their own Pokémon, and then once all four of them were standing upon the wraparound walkway that skirted the side of the power plant and overlooked the bay, they faced the veritable sea of Grimer awaiting them out in the water. Grimer. The abnormally large Grimer bellowed as it suddenly fired a massive glob of sludgy poison at them. Pikachu used Thunderbolt. Ash yelled quickly, which startled Pikachu into action as he jumped up and released a powerful energy bolt with a loud chew. Both attacks collided in midair and cancelled each other out, while Magnemite immediately seemed to attach itself to Pikachu again after witnessing his electric power once more. Pika! The little electric mouse complained as he leaned back on one foot and tried to get away from the metallic menace, but to no avail. There was no time for humorous pondering on poor Pikachu's plight, however, because at that moment, the big Grimer pointed forward with a sludgy arm and seemed to command its smaller kin to charge. As soon as that command was given, a large force of the Grimer in the bay began charging at the side of the power plant's outside walkway. Although, they were mostly aiming for the pipe that Ash and his friends had just escaped from. Guys, can you handle the smaller ones while we take the big guy down? Ash looked at his friends and, upon getting a firm affirmation nod from them, he took off running further down the walkway while Brock, Misty and Giselle called out their Pokémon again to do battle with the menacing horde of incoming Grimer. While Staryu, Starmie, Graveler and Marowak began to do battle with all of the smaller Grimer to keep them away, Ash drew the big one's attention by having V hit it with a flamethrower. As soon as the fiery attack hit, the diversionary tactic worked and the oversized Grimer turned its attention to them. Then, roaring in anger, it moved quickly to them over the water in order to engage them in battle. As soon as it reached them, Ash commanded Pikachu to use Thunderbolt on Grimer, which he did with a loud cry of his name. However, the large mass of living sludge took them all by surprise as it suddenly shrunk down temporarily, marginally so, using the move Minimize, in order to evade Pikachu's attack. Then, afterwards, it shot back to its full size and sent a thick glob of poisonous sludge hurtling towards the walkway they were standing on. As the bay behind them was quickly illuminated by the battling and flying attacks of Brock and the girls' Pokémon taking on and chasing away all the other Grimer, Ash raised his hand. V use Flamethrower and Pikachu use Thunderbolt. Quick! Both Pokémon unleashed their attacks just in time and managed to collide in midair with the sludge ball, the combined attack being enough to beat it into a stalemate and cause a draw. The big Grimer was more adept at battling than they would have figured for a wild Pokémon though, since it came up with a quick backup move and started shooting rapid balls of smaller, more compact sludge at its perceived foes. Pikachu jump up and use a spinning Thunderbolt to knock those balls out of the air. Ash ordered. And V use Rapid Fire Flamethrower. Pikachu jumped up on the railing of the walkway and then sprung into the air, spinning himself around in a dizzying circle while he commenced to using Thunderbolt again. Only this time, the bolts of electricity shot out from his body in widespread patterns and, in conjunction with V using Rapid Burst Flamethrower, the dual effort served as an effective defense against the incoming wave of sludge balls. However, even though Ash was glad their 2 consecutive counter-attacks had worked, he knew there was no way they could win with Grimer fighting them from out in the water. V and Pikachu, both, would be at a disadvantage in the water and, furthermore, there was no place to stand. Just as he was contemplating their current situation though, watching Pikachu and V continue a long distance back and forth with Grimer, Ash saw Magnemite hover down in front of him and begin communicating with him in its own way. Confused, Ash watched Magnemite float around and make the metallic sounds it emitted to speak and, eventually, he was forced to just ask. Magnemite, what are you trying to tell me? The dual steel, electric-type Pokémon looked down at Pikachu and then began floating up and down before it finally went up under Ash's hand and used its head to push upward on it. The boy observed this strange behavior for a short time before, finally, the gears in his head began turning and realization struck him. Hey! You want Pikachu to get on top of your head so you can ferry him out to Grimer and defeat it, don't you? Magnemite floated up and down again, as if nodding its head, while Ash looked taken aback. Magnemite, are you sure? You really want to help us? The metallic Pokémon made the bobbing motion again, which made Ash smile. Okay, thanks. I'll take you up on that. He then looked down at Pikachu and got his attention. Hey Pikachu, come here. The electric type turned around and jumped down off the railing before hurrying over to Ash, leaving V to handle the battle with Grimer for now. Listen Pi, Ash began. Magnemite wants to help us out and I think I know how you can do it. He then gestured at the other electric Pokémon while Pikachu seemed less than pleased at the idea of working with the one who had stalked him ever since they entered the power plant. If you jump on top of Magnemite, it can fly you out to Grimer and then you can launch a surprise attack against it at close range. Pikachu looked up at Magnemite and flipped his ear to the side for a moment before sighing. Pika. As if resigning himself to what he knew had to be done. V. Ash turned his attention to the at present fire type. I want you to use Fire Spin and distract Grimer so Pikachu and Magnemite can get close to it, okay. V barked a reply and then launched a widespread, spiraling circle of flames from his mouth that dispersed out over the water and caused Grimer to recoil back a little with an arm up due to the brightness and intensity of the heat. At that same moment, Pikachu hopped up on the railing again and then jumped onto Magnemite's head as the metallic Pokémon got into position. Holding on tight, Pikachu kept himself low while his magnetized ride began swiftly moving out across the bay towards Grimer. V turned up the power of the fire spin by increasing the heat of his fire sac, which in turn made the flames brighter still until the oversized Grimer was soon thoroughly blinded. Across the water, Misty had to duck to avoid a wayward ball of sludge which impacted on the wall behind her. This was followed by her Staryu spinning over and shooting a cannon of water from one of its pointed ends, effectively hitting and subduing the Grimer that had tried to attack her. Seeing the brightness of the intense flames over near Ash's way, the orange-haired girl yelled. What's Ash doing? I don't know, but Brock paused a moment to clench his fist in satisfaction as his graveler hit a small cluster of Grimer down in the water with a large rock. We really need to focus on our own situation right now. I agree. Giselle called back, which was followed by her ordering Marowak to use Bonemerang on a few Grimer that were trying to get inside the pipe. At that same moment, on the other side of the bay, Pikachu and Magnemite managed to get right up on Grimer while the flames V was fueling began to finally die down. However, just when the abnormally large Grimer opened its eyes again and looked to the side, finally seeing Pikachu and Magnemite within feet of it, it was too late for it to act. At that point, Ash yelled. Now Pikachu. Use Thunder. From atop Magnemite's head, Pikachu's cheeks sparked and the sky overhead grew even darker as he built up his power for the coming attack. Then, right before he unleashed the powerful lightning attack, Magnemite surprised Ash and Pikachu both by sending out a thunderbolt to go with large bolts of thunder Pikachu sent tumbling down out of the clouds. The dual electric attack caught the giant Grimer by surprise and, unable to move away in time, ended up taking the high voltage charge dead on. The base seemed to light up like a fireworks celebration was underway as the colors of bright yellow and gold washed the area in a blinding burst of electrical, statically charged rays. The likes of which caused the battling between Ash's friends and the smaller Grimer to halt, immediately. When the bright light show comprising the aftereffect of the double electric type attack finally passed a short time thereafter, Ash removed his arm from his eyes and looked down into the murky, black water below. There, in a gooped-up heap, floating atop the water, was the lead Grimer, the unusually large ball of living sludge now unconscious as sparks of electricity still danced on and off of its unmoving form. All right. Ash pumped his fist. You see that, guys? Great work. V jumped up and down beside of him while Pikachu made a happy smiling face and then looked down at Magnemite. Pika. The kindly-sounding chirp in his voice was apparently enough to convince Magnemite that Pikachu no longer was irritated or annoyed with it for following him around because of his electrical energy. Magnemite. The metallic Pokémon replied back as its eyes seemed to upturn like it was smiling as well at their teamwork. Ash then looked down at the unconscious Grimer and narrowed his eyes. I need to make sure this guy here can never rally those Grimer again and try to invade the power plant. He then reached back into one of the pouches of his red and black backpack that he kept his empty Pokeballs in and pulled one out without looking. Then, as he enlarged it, the boy spun the ball in hand before tossing it down at Grimer. As soon as the Pokeball made contact, it popped up and then snapped open before pulling the unconscious poison type into it. Ash watched it land on the water's surface and then wobble around in the water itself for several long, tense seconds before it finally came to a stop and then went still. Seeing the stars burst forth from the ball, signifying a successful capture, Ash grinned and snapped his fingers. All right. Without needing to be commanded, V changed into his Vaporeon form and jumped down into the water. After swimming up to the ball and grabbing it in his mouth, the multi-type Pokémon swam back to the walkway and jumped up onto it before dropping the ball at Ash's feet. Reaching down, he grabbed the ball and then stood up again before smiling and holding it out. We got a Grimer, you guys. Pikachu and V both cheered at their trainer's proclamation while, across the bay, all the other Grimer had started to flee out of fear after seeing the massive electrical attack. Look, they're running away. Giselle pointed at the fleeing Grimer. Back out into the sea. I wonder what did it. Misty wondered aloud as she rubbed some sweat from her brow and then bent down to examine Starmie, whom had taken a sludge attack but didn't seem to be poisoned. Their questions were soon answered a short time later though as Ash came running up to them with a wide grin on his face. Hey, guys! He yelled out while waving to them. Ash! They all said together as he finally joined them with Pikachu, V and Magnemite in tow. Are you okay? Giselle asked in concern. What happened to that big Grimer you were battling? He smiled at her. We took care of it. He then looked around. Looks like all the other Grimer finally ran off too. Brock nodded. Yeah, after you apparently had Pikachu use one of his electrical attacks, they all got scared and ran off. So how did you handle that big one? Misty asked as she came up closer to Ash. Did it flee too? That was all thanks to these three. He looked down at his Pokémon. V used an attack to distract Grimer and then Pikachu and Magnemite actually worked together to defeat it. Magnemite helped out. Giselle asked in amazement while Brock and Misty appeared equally surprised. Yeah. Ash smiled and nodded. He and Pikachu combined their electric attacks together and fried Grimer. Didn't stand a chance. Wow. Misty then looked at the metallic Pokémon and smiled as well. Well, thanks for your help, Magnemite. Yeah, thanks. Giselle agreed with a friendly smile while Brock did the same. You're a regular hero now, Magnemite. The floating electric type almost appeared to blush as it looked down and shifted its gaze away from their admiring stares. But you know, Brock began in a serious manner. That Grimer might come back again and bring its buddies with it. No, it won't. The black-haired boy shook his head before holding up the Pokeball now in his hand. Because I caught it. Misty and Giselle's eyes went wide while Brock appeared taken aback. You caught it. Smiling again, Ash waved the ball at them. Yep. Right here. Somehow. Misty's surprised expression relaxed and she shook her head in fond amusement. I'm not really surprised after all. I'm happy for you, Ash, Giselle chirped cheerfully. That just means another addition to your growing family. He smiled in reply, but Misty suddenly exclaimed while pointing up. Look. Smoke is coming from the top of the factory again. They all looked to where she was pointing and indeed, the power plant had evidently started running again, which made Brock put his hands on his hips. Good. That means the Pokémon at the center won't be in any danger anymore. That's a relief. Ash wiped his forehead with the back of his arm. I was really beginning to worry what would happen to those Pokémon if we didn't get the power going again. Suddenly, the radio he was carrying started to beep, and after answering it, they heard one of the two power plant employees on the other end of it speaking. We just wanted to let you kids know that whatever you did worked. The Grimer are all gone and we got the turbines running again. Thank you so much, we couldn't have done it without you. Pressing the button on the side, Ash responded back. No problem. We'll see you guys soon, heading back now. After that, the group of four returned their Pokémon and headed back into the power plant with Magnemite still following closely in tow. Only this time, having it around wasn't as much of a burden as before. Especially not to Pikachu, whom had seemed to make peace with it and was now even freely chatting with Magnemite from his perch on Ash's shoulder. All in all, it was an all-around win for everyone. Save for the destructive Grimer, of course. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Everyone, I really don't know how to thank you properly for everything you've done for us. The mayor said in a tone of gratitude the next morning as Ash and his friends stood outside the Pokémon Center and prepared to leave. If it wasn't for you, our whole city could have been in dire distress, so on behalf of all of our citizens, I just want to say, thank you. He bowed his head lowly in respect and Nurse Joy did the same. Yes. If it was not for all of you, then the Pokémon at my center would have very possibly died, so thank you as well. She then looked up again and smiled. In fact, seeing how all of you tried so hard to help us has inspired me to become a better nurse and take this job more seriously. Like my sisters. Ah, hey, come on. Ash waved them off humbly. It was no big deal, honestly. Yeah, Misty chimed in. We just wanted to help out, and if the power wouldn't have come back on, then a lot of people and Pokémon would have suffered. Giselle nodded in agreement while Brock spoke up himself. Like Ash and Misty said, don't thank us. But if I may, I do recommend trying a little harder to keep your city more clean and maybe even trying to clean up this pollution. If you don't, even without their leader, those Grimer are sure to come back eventually. Ash nodded. Brock is right. Industry and factory work is a really important mainstay for any economy that hopes to be healthy, but steps can always be taken to help ensure that at the same time, a community is doing everything in its power to stay clean and efficient. You don't have to shut down your factories, shut down your production, or halt it all with a bunch of burdensome regulations, Misty added. Because then everyone will suffer when the power plant starts to lose productivity and the energy output is decreased. Giselle completed the small collective advisory. But if you just try to find ways to work with the power company and come together to work at coming up with ideas to help clean things up and limit on your pollution, without harming your production, then everyone will win. Pollution is the natural cycle to humanity, Brock said wisely. Everyone that lives pollutes a little bit and you can't stop the natural cycle of things, you'd be a complete idiot to try. But you can always try a little harder to find ways to limit and in some cases even eliminate what you make unclean if you just work together and find common ground. A community is a family, Ash said simply. You can't have it all one side's way, but if you work together, there's no telling what you can do. The mayor nodded, glad to see such wise words coming from so young a mouths. You children are wise beyond your years indeed. And you are correct as well. In fact, I spent all last night starting up a framework for a mass cleanup bill that I intend to bring before the committee this weekend. Working together with our citizens, the board and our local industry leaders, hopefully we can indeed come to a lasting solution that will benefit everyone. At that moment, his eyes suddenly widened a little as he snapped his fingers. Oh, that reminds me. Ash. He then dug around in his inner suit pockets for a minute before withdrawing a small, spherical device wrapped in cloth. Here, young man, those 2 workers you helped at the power plant last night asked me to give this to you this morning when I stopped by to see how things were doing. They said this was a thank you for all you did for them. It was found in one of the generator rooms where magneton frequently gather. Ash took the item and unraveled it to reveal a small, bright and shiny yellow ball laying in the cloth wrapping. It was a normal yellow color concerning the sphere itself, but inside seemed to be a bright, golden light. Almost like a ball of electricity harnessed into a small, condensed space. Wow, that's a light ball! Giselle exclaimed in amazement. I learned about those in Pokémon tech. They boost an electric Pokémon's power to varying degrees depending on how strong the Pokémon is that holds it. Wow! Ash examined the ball as Brock pointed at it. Hey Ash, Pikachu would really benefit from that in battle. The black-haired boy nodded. Yeah, I was already thinking the same thing. He then held it up to Pikachu on his shoulder. What do you think, buddy? Would you like me to maybe make a necklace out of this for you? It's right about your size. The little electric mouse leaned forward to sniff the ball, only for the object to send out a current which zapped his nose and caused Pikachu to recoil his nose back and shake his head. Pika. They all laughed and Giselle pointed out informatively. That means Pikachu has a lot of electrical power that the ball is reacting to. It should really give him a big boost. So? Ash asked while smiling. What do you think? Pikachu looked at the ball and back at his trainer before smiling and holding up a peace sign. Pikachu. They also wanted me to apologize to you 3, the mayor continued with a small frown. Those boys looked all around for something they might be able to give you as well and even tasked the day shift crew to help, but they couldn't find anything they thought you would like. They said they thought of Ash with that ball because Pikachu was an electric type that they vaguely were aware would benefit from it. That's no problem, Misty said with a smile. We were just glad to be able to help out. Yeah, that's reward enough for itself, Giselle stated, which Brock nodded and hummed in agreement to. The mayor and Nurse Joy both smiled in relief and then Ash looked at his friends after putting the light ball away in his pack. Well guys, we better get going. Giselle and Brock seemed to agree but Misty just pointed. I think we're still forgetting something. Ash looked to where she was pointing and saw Magnemite floating a short ways away, never having left even after they all retired into the center the previous night. Smiling softly, Ash walked up to the metallic Pokémon. Magnemite, he began. We're all really grateful for you helping us. If it wasn't for you, it would have been harder for me, Pikachu and V to take down Grimer. Nodding in enthusiastic agreement, Pikachu smiled and chirped at the other electric type, whom he had grown rather fond of in their short time together. Quite a stretch from how it had all first started out. You take care of yourself, okay? Ash bade. However, Magnemite just got closer to Ash, and then floated down atop his head. Where it spoke simply in its monotone, metallic voice. Magnemite. Ah. Ash blinked up at the Pokémon now resting on his head and then, observantly, Giselle hypothesized. You know Ash. I think Magnemite wants to come with us. The young man looked back up at Magnemite and asked with a blink. Is that true, Magnemite? Looking down at the human, Magnemite gave a small tilt forward of its head in the gesture that obviously meant yes. Gradually smiling a smile that stretched ear to ear, Ash nodded. Well, alright then, you're more than welcome to come with us. After that, Magnemite floated down off his head and just hovered in front of him while Ash pulled a Pokeball out from his pack and then gently tapped the electric and steel type's head. Magnemite soon disappeared into the ball with a red flash and it didn't even struggle one time before dinging, signaling a completed capture. Letting Magnemite out as soon as its capture was complete, Ash pulled it into his arms and spun the Pokemon around before holding it up. I've got a Magnemite. Pikachu, V. Pikachu and V both cheered as they jumped in celebration with their trainer. Misty, Brock, Giselle and even the mayor and Nurse Joy smiled gladly for Ash and Magnemite, but the celebration was short-lived as they suddenly heard a loud noise. Turning to the source of the noise, they only had enough time to turn around fully before one of the sewer covers in the road suddenly exploded skyward and a metallic arm came erupting out of it and grabbed Pikachu off of Ash's shoulder. In seconds, the arm was retracting back and then, raising up off of some kind of platform was Jessie, James and Meowth. Each one dressed in strange blue suits while Pikachu had been stuffed into some kind of a glass box container. Oh come on. Ash stepped forward and yelled. Not you three. Jessie laughed aloud, her face taking on a nasty sneer as she jeered at him. You won't ever be rid of us, little boy. We want your Pikachu and we won't stop until we have him. James laughed as he looked down at the glass box he was now holding in his hand, the one containing Pikachu. And it looks like we already succeeded at that too. Hey! Meowth smirked up at Pikachu, whom was now glaring daggers at the three of them. And yous can just forget about trying to shock your way out of there, buddy boy, that glass box is totally electric proof and lined with rubber. Well, at least you three finally ditched that stupid motto of yours. Ash shot back. If I had to hear it again, I think I'd rip my ears off. The three of them shot him a glare as Jessie growled. Watch what you say, boy. Our motto is not dumb. And we didn't abandon it, James pointed. We just haven't gotten to use it yet. Wait a minute. The mayor suddenly pointed at them as his eyes widened. I recognize you three. You were the ones we originally hired to get rid of the Grimer. Jessie smirked and put her hands on her hips. That's right, and we appreciated the down payment. We'll send you our full bill of services later, okay? James taunted before the three of them broke into laughter together. The portly mayor gritted his teeth and clenched his fists as he growled. Those charlatans. We paid them good money and all they did was disappear and not do a single thing about the Grimer before you kids showed up. That's because they're dirty, rotten cheats, Misty stated with narrowed eyes. And they're just a bunch of practical jokesters too who can't do anything right. Hey, we resent that. James shot back. We're only failures who don't get things right most of the time, not all the time. With a loud whop, he was suddenly laying on the ground with swirly eyes as Jessie hissed at him. Don't talk about us like that. We're top-tier winners. You guys are just a bunch of losers and lowlives who steal people's Pokémon. Giselle accused. There's nothing good or right about any of you. Oh, cry me a river, Miss Goody Goody. Jessie sneered back in a condescending tone. You and your little boyfriend are just a couple of no-count do-gooders that never prosper, and your two friends are just the stupid little cheer squad. Team Rocket, why don't you just leave us alone? Brock yelled angrily. Your own group isn't doing too hot nowadays, I heard, so why don't you go be of some real use to them instead of trying to capture one little Pikachu? For supposed members of such a feared organization, you look like nothing but big jokes to me. Team Rocket. The mayor exclaimed in fear as he and Joy stepped back while he pointed shakily. Those three are with that horrible criminal organization we've been hearing about on the news. Misty snorted. Please. They're just a bunch of clowns. Oh yeah. Meowth shot back. Well, look who's laughing now. We got Pikachu and you can't do nothing to get him back. They all laughed again before Ash stepped forward and glared. I'm warning you three, give me back Pikachu, now. Or what? James demanded. V went to jump in so he could save his partner, but instead, Magnemite floated out instead. Ash, seeing that the metallic little Pokémon appeared ready for battle by the look in its eye, asked. You wanna battle and free Pikachu then? Magna. It responded back while the magnets on the side of its body began to spark. Meowth blinked. Hey, that's a Magnemite. He then smirked. Looks like Twerps got himself a new Pokémon. Jesse and James both smirked as well and pulled out their Pokeballs. Fine then, we'll just have to teach them a lesson. The magenta-haired woman announced as she threw out her Pokeball and called out Arbok, quickly followed by James who summoned Weezing. Together, they called out. Arbok use Poison Sting. Weezing Sludge Attack. Magnemite be on your guard. Ash advised, which earned him a quick nod as the dual-type Pokémon got ready. Seeing Poison Sting coming first, he commanded. Dodge that and then look out for Sludge Attack. Showing impressive speed, Magnemite swerved to the left to avoid Arbok's poisonous barbs and then dropped downward to also avoid Weezing's. Arbok use Bite. Jesse ordered while James had Weezing use Tackle. However, Magnemite merely waited for Arbok to come upon it and then levitated up just as the snake went to bite at it. From there, Ash's new Pokémon simply dropped its metallic weight down and smashed itself into Arbok's head before hovering right in front of its opponent's head. Then, just as Weezing was preparing to smash into it, Magnemite feinted to the side and caused James's Pokémon to collide with Jesse's and knock them both to the ground. Watch where your Weezing is falling. Jessie demanded as she raised a fist at James, whom cowered back with a hand up in front of his face. I'm sorry, it wasn't my fault. Alright Magnemite, let's end this. Ash raised his hand and called for the attack he was aware Magnemite knew. Use Thunderbolt. Magnemite. The robotic Pokémon chanted as its small body became shrouded in an electrical charge, which made the rockets nervous. Get up you two. Jessie commanded, only for her eyes to widen fearfully as she saw that Arbok's coils were wrapped around Weezing from the fall. Too late to avoid it, the two struggling Pokémon were sitting targets as Magnemite finally unleashed its stored-up electrical charge with a chant of, Magnemi Ite. Arbok and Weezing were both struck and illuminated by the bright bolt of lightning and started to get painfully electrocuted as their bodies froze up entirely. Pretty soon, the bolt exploded and each large Pokémon was thrown back at their individual trainers' feet while Magnemite's magnet arms began rotating and spinning rapidly. Being that he didn't call for the move, Ash didn't know what Magnemite was about to do until he saw several slicing sound waves of pure energy emit from his new Pokémon's rotating magnets. Realizing the move as it hit as being Sonic Boom, Ash and the others watched Arbok and Weezing get blown straight into Jesse and James. Which also caused the glass and plastic cage holding Pikachu to fly up out of James's hand and into the air. Magnemite was already on the right track however and aimed one final sonic boom at the box, which broke it into pieces upon impact and allowed Pikachu to jump free. Landing on the ground next to Magnemite, Pikachu looked at his newfound teammate and nodded in gratitude. Pika. Looking down, Magnemite eyes smiled and nodded while Ash smirked. Nice work Magnemite. Okay, you two ready to send these guys packing? They each nodded seriously, leading him to smile and raise both hands. Alright, good. Both of you, use Thunderbolt and end this. While Jesse, James and Meowth attempted to struggle up from under the weight of the two Pokémon laying on top of them, Pikachu and Magnemite charged up their respective attacks and then, at the exact same time, each electric type called out in perfect tandem and released their attacks. Chew. Magnemi-te. The two bolts of thunder actually intertwined in the air on the way to their targets and combined instead into one, even bigger bolt which fell upon the three rockets and their Pokémon in a bright illumination of golden light and arcing static. Everyone else had to cover their eyes from the brightness of the dual thunder attack's fury and as soon as it exploded, the once again defeated Team Rocket were sent hurtling skyward. We were so close. James whined pathetically as his hair smoked at the very top. Next time we're going with an all-plastic cage that can't get smashed apart. Jessie fumed as she shook her fist at him. You idiot. Meowth, meanwhile, only sighed. We shoulda took Twerp's other Pokémon too before grabbing Pikachu. The last thing that was heard from them was their routine, blasting off again. Motto while down on the ground, Ash ran out and picked Pikachu up. Embracing him and then grabbing Magnemite at the same time to pull it close with the other arm. You two were a fantastic team. He praised. Really. You worked great together on that last attack. Pikachu smiled at his trainer's praise and Magnemite seemed a little embarrassed while Brock chuckled. Well, that was a heck of a send-off. I'm just glad those Pokémon thieves are gone now, Joy said in relief as Ash walked up to his friends again with both Pokémon still in his arms. Alright, now we can go since the crazy weirdness for the day is over with. He smiled in amusement though as Giselle cracked jokingly. Don't jinx us, Ash, or we might end up running into them a second time in one day. Oh, I hope not. Misty dipped her head and sighed woefully. Putting up with those idiots once a week even is enough. Everyone shared a laugh of agreement at her admittedly accurate, if not still humorous comment. Though eventually, with Team Rocket dealt with, all four eventually bade their goodbyes to the mayor and Nurse Joy and then set off down the road and on their way out of Gringy City. Do you think this city will actually be able to succeed at cleaning itself up? Misty asked a short time later as she and the others walked along a road that led out of the city near the waterside at the bay. I hope so, Giselle replied as she walked with her hands in the straps of her pink backpack. It'd be a shame if those Grimer ever came back. Brock smiled. Well, if they can all come together and work for the mutual betterment of this place and compromise, I don't see why they can't. Here's to hoping, I suppose. Ash, however, looked out at the distant horizon where the sun was actually shining over the sea and bathing the usually gloomy city in a rare moment of light and sunshine. Then, a few moments later, after they walked out of the harbor and up a small hill that led out of the city, Ash turned around and looked down on the currently sunbathed town. With Pikachu and V on either shoulder and Magnemite floating beside him out of its Pokeball, the young man gave a small smile as the slightly chilly December wind blew through his messy locks. His friends standing around him as well and now looking down at the rare picture of serene beauty that the sunlight offered the gloomy city, almost like a pleasant harbinger of good tidings to come, Ash said in a way that seemed to carry a sense of surety to it. If people work together and put aside their differences to unite for a greater cause, there's no telling what this world could achieve. He then looked back and gave a smile that reached his eyes. And I'll always believe that.